Can I just tell you, it gives me enormous pleasure to tell you that the Melbourne Press Club Lifetime Achievement Award this year goes to my great mentor and great friend, Robert Gottliebsen. Just before we hear from Bob, just a few words. I should say that every person in this room, every journalist in Australia in some way owes some debt of gratitude to Robert Gottliebsen. The reason for it is not just those that he mentored directly, and you heard certainly about the Chanticleer column, you saw about that, still one of the most widely read financial columns in this country today. Well, that's Bob. 44 years ago, he created that column, and who's to imagine that a column could still be as vital and relevant today and under Tony Boyd's stewardship as it was through the hands of people such as Alan Kohler or Ivor Rees or Malcolm Maiden or John Dury or Alan Dury, all these people who have been through that column. Think about the way in which, say, our analysis of the wealth of Australia has come through the BRW, now the Financial Review, list of the Rich 200, that we know more about the lives of the wealthy, that the Tax Office know more about the lives and indeed the wealth of those people, having used that list for years, basically as a reference guide as to who they should try and attack next. The fact of the matter is that Robert Gottliebsen was a part of all of that. Plenty more. You heard about some of the reporters, some of the journalists that he's mentored on the way through. And you think about Adele, say, for example, and what she's achieved, and yet her role really as an investigative reporter started with Bob on Business Review Weekly. You think about Alan Kohler, you think about David Koch, you think about so many others who really have been inspired by Bob, but also at some point in time have probably had their copy gottied by Bob Gottliebsen. Now, I should explain that when a person is gottied by Bob, it generally happens on a Monday deadline. It's a Sunday night. You might have had other things to do, but Bob would ring up and say, "I think you better come around because I'm not happy with the story." You'd go around to his house, his long-suffering wife, Barbara, who's been a partner of his for such a long time and so faithful and loyal, really absolutely, just part of this team, would make you a pumpkin soup and you'd sit down and your copy would be gottied. You'd have no idea afterwards as to what has been written because Bob's writing, I've got to say, is incoherent. He's actually not a journalist at all, I don't believe, because he refused to type for years and years, would only dictate his copy. He, as a result, when he scrawled on your copy, you would sit there and look at this and have absolutely no idea as to what it said or how you were to turn it into a front cover story for the following day because you had been gottied. But the whole notion of news that you can use meant that business journalism and indeed personal financial journalism in this country was demystified by the efforts of Bob Gottliebsen. And indeed today, I believe that Australia enjoys one of the highest levels of financial literacy in the Western world, largely as a result of the efforts and certainly the entrepreneurialism of Bob Gottliebsen. Can I just say it's been an amazing ride over the years with Bob, and even the Business Spectator, where he's gone and found a new era of technology. But the great lesson of Bob, I think, is even right here tonight. And that is a little picture for every one of us, that longevity is actually vital in this industry, that you can work in this industry and still have relevance at the ripe old age of 77. Bob Gottliebsen.
Hard to know how to follow that. I must first of all thank the Melbourne Press Club. That's a body that was set up and you wondered whether it would keep going, but it's just gone from strength to strength and they've taken it to whole new plateaus, and I'm very grateful for this award and I thank them very much. But I'd also like to thank my family. You heard Barbara mentioned, goodness me, the absentee husband, the absentee father, but despite that, we got 2 marvellous kids and 5 grandchildren, 4 of which have just come today. One was... the Gottliebsens came to Australia in 1872. And in 1959, when I started with the Herald and Weekly Times, I was the first Gottliebsen not to make baskets. That's what Gottliebsens did. And I got into the journalism business partly because Dad made sure I had an education so I could get out. of that whole exercise. And when I got into journalism in '59, the remarkable similarities to today. Young journalists a lot of young journalists were not getting a lot of pay. There were surplus journalists all over the place because the Argus had shut. It was a huge tragedy for the industry. It was tough. And yet, by the 1970s, it had changed. And we began to realise that if we got the journalism right, and by journalism I don't just mean print, I'm talking about television, I'm talking about radio, you do all three things, and more, of course, naturally, a lot more now. If you got the journalism right, the audience would come. And when the audience came, then the revenue would come. The hard part about today is that that revenue is not always coming. My prediction is that this will change, and I'll tell you why in a moment. The other thing that's quite fascinating is I started a lot of mastheads. Not many of them actually survived. And you say, are you bitter about all that? And the answer is no, because what you actually get out of this, of starting new publications, training new journalists, is that you actually enjoy their career. You actually enjoy their success, and it's just been the most fantastic ride. Ross has mentioned a lot of them, but there's a whole lot more as well. One thing to never forget in journalism is that you can have the great journalism, best journalism, you've got to have that, that's essential. But you've also got to have publishing in the wider sphere. Your publishers, and here we're talking about radio and television and all media forms, the publishers are important. Let me tell you a story. BRW, we thought we were pretty good, right? We had a fantastic subscription system, and we linked with Time. We took half of Time Australia. I remember looking at the Time Australia profit and loss account, and I said, oh, I can cross that out there and that up there. We've got to make a lot of money here. It's very good old BRW expertise. And then we went to New York, and we walked into the Time subscription department. Oh. Is that how you do it? We actually learnt that there was a whole world of subscription expertise that we knew nothing about whatsoever. I tell you what, we hadn't left New York before we were working on how we would get the same expertise, and we hired the Hong Kong number 2 of Time in Hong Kong, and he came out to Melbourne to run, and we won that battle we had with Packer, and it was a battle, and we won it. Partly because of our journalism, but they had good journalism too, but because we got a totally new subscription system that had never been seen in Australia before. We copied Time. BRW lost when Fairfax took over the management of it. The first thing they did was to sack the subscription expertise. It was the beginning of the end. Why do I think that the good times will eventually come again, and that the good journalism that gets the audience will also get the revenue? I'll tell you why. It's not necessarily going to happen tomorrow. Don't look around and say, oh, tomorrow she's going to be great. It's not. There's a lot of change out there. Not all the mastheads will survive. Some will fail. But lots will survive, and new ones will take their place. And why I'm confident is this. You might ask me, what is the story? What is the set of stories or commentaries that you did that you got the most satisfaction out of? And it was my Unfair Contract series that I started in the Business Spectator and also in the Australian. And we got that legislation changed. And we've 8 million contracts for small business and large companies have to be changed. Every bank overdraft. And that was all done with digital journalism. There wasn't one drop of ink used. The power of digital is like something you've never seen. And when good journalism finally works out how you embrace that and how it works, and it mightn't be the way it's being done now, it might be different, it might be the same, don't know. But when that happens, the audience are coming anyway, but the revenue will also come. So I'm always an optimist, I might tell you, but I'm a great optimist about our long-term future in journalism, and I wouldn't mind starting again. Thank you very much.